الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. اللهم أخرجنا من ظلمات الوهم وأكرمنا بنور الفهم وافتح علينا بمعرفة العلم وحسن أخلاقنا بالحلم واجعلنا ممن يستمعون القول فيتبعون أحسنه. Inshallah ta'ala, we will continue reading from the book Shama'il al-Mohammadiah by Al-Imam al-Tirmidhi rahimahullah ta'ala, which is a book of hadith that describes the beauty of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we have been reading in the first chapter of this book, Babu ma ja'a fi khalqi Rasulillahi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And in this first chapter, Imam al-Tirmidhi narrates 14 hadith describing the outward beauty of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the external features and description of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And last time we began to speak about hadith number 7, which is the longest hadith in this chapter. And this is the hadith of Al-Hasan ibn Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu, who narrates from his maternal uncle Hala, Hind ibn Abi Hala radiallahu ta'ala anhu. So this is the longest hadith, and we read half of it last time, and inshallah tonight we will finish it bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. So we will pick up where we left off. قال هند بن أبي هالة رضي الله تعالى عنه كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إلى أن قال عريض الصدر بعيد ما بين المنكبين. So he is now describing the chest of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Last time we said that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his belly was leveled with his chest. Belly was leveled with his chest, which is something that many of us would wish and we should strive for. So that was his one of his physical features, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But this one, he was عريض الصدر بعيد ما بين المنكبين, that he had a broad chest, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he had broad shoulders. The distance between his shoulders was also big. So he had broad shoulders and a broad chest. ضخم الكراديس. The next description is about his joints, that his joints were also big, which is a sign of physical strength. You know, the elbows, the knees, the joints, they were big. أنور المتجرد, which means that whatever parts of his body were exposed, they would shine, they would emanate, they were illuminated. So the parts of his body that would show when he is wearing clothes, the parts of his body that show, that are exposed, they would shine with light. Then the next part, he says, موصول ما بين اللبة والسرة بشعر يجري كالخط. He had a thin line of hair that extended between the labba and the surah. The labba is an indentation above the chest. You know, above the chest there's an indentation. Starting from there down to the surah. Surah is the navel. So from the chest to the navel, he had a thin line of hair that was straight. عاري الثديين والبطن مما سوى ذلك. Other than that, he did not have any hair on his breasts, neither on his belly. He didn't have any other hair on his frontal portion, neither on his chest, nor neither on his breasts, nor on his belly. According to other narrations, the Prophet ﷺ did have hair in his armpits. He had some light hair in his armpits, and he used to pluck them from time to time to clean his armpits. However, the ulama have also mentioned that, as it is also mentioned in some of the Sahih narrations, that he did not have a bad odor in his armpits. He did not have a foul smell that emanated from his armpits. So that's also mentioned in the Sahih narrations about that. The next part says, أشعر الذراعين والمنكبين وأعالي الصدر. That there were 3 parts of his body that had a lot of hair. The first is الذراعين, his forearms. Okay, the forearms had a lot of hair. والمنكبين, the shoulders. The shoulders also had a lot of hair. وأعالي الصدر, the upper part of his chest. Okay, so earlier we saw that the breasts didn't have hair, but the upper part of the chest had hair and had a lot of hair. The next part says طويل الزندين. طويل الزندين means the part of the forearm that doesn't have flesh. The first part of the forearm, as you go down, you see flesh in your forearms. But the part that's closer to the wrist, that's called a zend. Zend is the part of the forearm that's closer to the wrist that doesn't have any flesh on it. That part was a long part in his body. So he had a long part of the forearm that doesn't have flesh, which is basically a kinaya to say that he had long forearms. Because if that part was long, then the rest of the arm was also long. So he had long forearms, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. The next part is rahbur raha. Rahbur raha, which means that he had wasi'ul kaf. He had a vast or a big palm. He had big palms, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. He had big palms. And having big palms is a figure of speech that's used in the Arabic language to describe a generous person. Somebody who has big palm, wasi'ul kaf, is someone who is generous. So he, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, was literally, he had big palms, and also the meaning of that, he was very generous, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. The next part is shathnul kaffaini wal qadamain, that he had big hands and big feet. He, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, had big hands, big size hands, and big size feet. Sa'ilul atraf. Sa'ilul atraf. His fingers and toes were long, but not too long. Okay? They were long and beautiful, but not extremely long. وَسَائِلُ الْأَطْرَافِ أَوْ قَالَ شَائِلُ الْأَطْرَافِ. Now here the narrator is not sure whether Hind said سَائِلُ الْأَطْرَافِ or شَائِلُ الْأَطْرَافِ. سَائِلُ الْأَطْرَافِ would mean that he had long fingers and toes. شَائِلُ الْأَطْرَافِ would mean that his fingers and toes were raised. They were not flat and pushed down, but they were slightly raised up. But they weren't so raised that they would be bent. They were not bent. His fingers and toes were not bent. They were straight, but even when they were straight, they had a slight rise, elevation in them. That's the meaning of sha'ilul atraf. Or sa'ilul atraf, which means that he had long, beautiful fingers and toes. The next part is khumsanul akhmasain. Khumsanul akhmasain, which means that, the part underneath the feet, some people have that flat. They have flat bottom of their feet. The Prophet ﷺ, his bottom of his feet was not flat. It had a curve in it. So the middle part of his foot was raised above the ground, but not too much. It wasn't raised a lot, and it was not completely flat, but it had a curvature. So when he stepped with barefoot onto the ground, you would see that there was a part that wouldn't leave a mark because it's raised above the ground. The next part is masihul qadamain yambu anhum al-ma'. This is describing the skin of his feet, that the skin of his feet didn't have cracks in it. There were no cracks in his feet, such that if water was poured over his feet, the water would quickly flow away from his feet. It wouldn't go into the cracks. It would flow away and drip down completely from his feet. So his feet, the skin of his feet, did not have cracks in it. It was smooth. The next part is إِذَا زَالَ زَالَ قَلْعًا يَخْطُو تَكَفُّيًا وَيَمْشِي هَوْنًا. The next part is describing his walking, how he walked, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And there's a number of descriptions here. إِذَا زَالَ زَالَ قَلْعًا يَخْطُو تَكَفُّيًا وَيَمْشِي هَوْنًا ذَرِيعُ الْمَشْيَ إِذَا مَشَى كَأَنَّمَا يَنْحَطُّ مِنْ صَبَبٍ. So how would he walk, sallallahu alaihi wasallam? First of all, إِذَا زَالَ زَالَ قَلْعًا. When he would lift his feet, he would lift them with strength, with activity, not lazily. You know, he would lift his feet with strength, with activeness, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And يَخْطُو تَكَفُّيًا وَيَمْشِي هَوْنًا, which means that يَمْشِي هَوْنًا means that when he puts his foot down, he puts it down gently. He doesn't slam his foot onto the ground, which is a sign of arrogance. Okay? So he lifts it with energy, but he puts it down with gentleness. So he combined between being active and yet being gentle, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Everything about him is perfect. I don't know if you're noticing. Everything, even the physical features, the way he walks, the way he does everything, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is perfect and moderate. He is the icon of balance, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and therefore the icon of beauty, both physically and spiritually. So when he would put his feet down, he would put them down كان يمشي هونا, and this is the description of عباد الرحمن in Surah Al-Furqan. وعباد الرحمن الذين يمشون على الأرض هونا كان يمشي هونا. So he would also walk with humility and not slamming his feet like the people in the military do when they're marching. ذريع المشية, his paces were long. His paces were long. Every footstep that he would take, they weren't short paces, they were long paces. And that's a sign of someone who has things to do. Whereas someone who is very lazy, they walk, they're strolling in the park, for example, you take short steps. But somebody who has things to do, places to go, they take long steps. Also, somebody who is arrogant, like a king, usually when they walk very slowly, and they take very short steps. But somebody who has, again, places to go, they take longer steps. So that's how he used to walk, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. His paces were long. ذريع المشي إذا مشى كأنما ينحط من صبب. When he would walk, it was as if he was walking downhill. As if he was walking downhill. That describes his leaning forward, that he would lean forward when he would walk, and he would also take quick paces. He would walk fast. People had to really walk fast to keep up with him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. وَإِذَا الْتَفَتَ الْتَفَتَ جَمِيعًا. When he would turn his entire body. Like if somebody was calling him from behind him, yarhamukallah, he wouldn't just turn like that to talk to them. He would turn his entire body to talk to them. And that's also a sign of humility. Somebody who's arrogant, they just kind of turn their head but keep their body straight. But he would turn his whole body when he talked to somebody. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. خافض الطرف نظره إلى الأرض أطول من نظره إلى السماء. Now this is describing his gaze. It's almost coming to the end now. This is describing his gaze. خافض الطرف. He would lower his gaze. His gaze would be lowered. Most of the time, if you saw him, he would be looking down. He would be looking down. And that is the gaze of someone who is in reflection, who is constantly reflecting and pondering. And it's also the gaze of someone who minds his own business, and someone who is humble. So his gaze would be lowered most of the time. نظره إلى الأرض أطول من نظره إلى السماء. He would be looking at the ground more than looking at the sky. So most of the time he would be looking at the ground, not at the sky. And that means that he did look sometimes up as well. Usually when he was awaiting wahi, when he was awaiting some revelation to come down, he would look at the sky. When somebody would ask him a question and he didn't know how to answer, and he would think about the answer, and if he wanted some wahi to come down, he would look up at the sky. But most of the time, he would be looking at the ground. نظره إلى الأرض أطول من نظره إلى السماء. جل نظره الملاحظة. جل نظره الملاحظة. Which means that when he did look at things around him, when he looked at things, not people, things. When he looked at things, he would mostly look from his lahab. Lahab is the corner of the eye that is away from the nose. Corner of the eye that is next to the ear is called lahab. The corner of the eye that's closer to the nose is called al-muq. So al-lahab, that's from mulahadha, comes from lahab, meaning that he would look from the corner of his eye. When he would look at things, he would look at it from the corner of his eye, which is a sign of someone who's not very interested in something. When you're very interested in something, you look at it from the front of your eye, you face it, you look at it, and you stare at it. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was instructed in the Quran, وَلَا تَمُدَّنَّ عَيْنَيْكَ, that do not look closely, do not stare at the ornaments of this world. So he was told not to be interested in this world, and therefore when he looked at things in this world, he looked at them from the corner of his eye, as if he's just glancing at them, but not looking at them with pleasure, with desire, not satiating his sight with whatever he's looking at. So جُلُّ نَظَرِهِ الْمُلَاحَظَةِ, most of the things that he would look at, he would just look at them from the corner of his eye, and then as long as there's a need to look at them, and then he would look down again. Most of his gaze was looking down at the ground. The last part of the hadith is talking about how he would behave and how he would walk when he was walking with other people. And it says, يَسُوقُ أَصْحَابَهُ وَيَبْدُرُ مَنْ لَقِيَ بِالسَّلَامِ. يَسُوقُ أَصْحَابَهُ, that when he would walk with his companions, he would walk behind them. His companions would walk in front of him, and he would walk behind them. Yasuqu means to walk behind. Yaqudu means to walk in front. So he would walk behind them, and he would let his companions go before him. And he would tell them, خَلُّوا ظَهْرِي لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ, that leave my back for the angels. The angels would follow behind him. He would be in the middle, and his companions would follow, would walk in front of him. And of course, this is a sign of humility again. This is a sign of humbleness. Which leader of the world have you seen, when he walks with his entourage, that, he walks in the back and everybody else walks in the front? Except for the bodyguards, everybody else walks behind, But Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, first of all, didn't have any bodyguards, and all of his followers, he followed them in his walk. So, this is to teach us tawadu, this is to teach us humility. Also because, since he is, he grew up as a shepherd. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam grew up as a shepherd. And what do shepherds do with their sheep? They walk behind the sheep. So he learned from very early on the lifestyle of a shepherd. And now that he's a Nabi, now that he's a prophet, that his people are like his sheep, that he needs to take care of. So he walks behind them, taking care of them, making sure they're protected, making sure everybody is with the group, nobody is left behind. So this is also because he's the murabbi, that he is someone who is taking care of his people. And also, usually the poor people are the ones who walk in the back. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam loved the poor. So he would walk close to the poor among the people. And so on and so forth. There's many other pieces of wisdom that can be derived from that. The last part of the hadith says, وَيَبْدُرُ مَنْ لَقِيَ بِالسَّلَامِ, that he would be the first one to say salam to whoever he met. Didn't matter, even if it was a child. If the Prophet ﷺ met a child, he would be the first one to say salam. And this is one of the few things that is a sunnah that has more reward than the fard. Usually, fard has more reward than sunnah. We just prayed Isha and then we prayed sunnah after that. The fard 4 rak'ah has more reward than the sunnah afterwards. The fard fast of Ramadan has more reward than the sunnah fast of Shawwal. You know, the Fajr prayer has more reward than Taraweeh prayers. All right? So fard usually has more reward than sunnah. But this is one of those few cases where the sunnah has more reward than the fard. Saying, initiating salam is sunnah. Responding to salam is fard. Right? If I say salam to you, I may or may not say it. It's sunnah. But if I say salam to you, you have to respond to my salam. You have to say wa alaikum salam. That's fard. But initiating salam, even though it's sunnah, has more reward than responding to salam. So this is one of those exceptional cases. And the Prophet ﷺ would initiate salam no matter who he met. So this hadith is related by Al-Tabarani in his Kabir and Al-Bayhaqi in Dala'il al-Nubuwah and others. Allahu ta'ala a'lam wa sallallahu wa sallim wa barik ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. In the end, I would just like to say that I am genuinely very, very happy to see Imam Abdul Rahman here finally. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless his transfer to this town and his move to this community. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala facilitate his move into this community. May Allah azza wa jal bring benefit to the community through him. And may Allah azza wa jal bless all of you through his stay here, inshaAllah ta'ala. And since he is here, then I am no longer needed here, inshaAllah ta'ala. But of course, I would love to visit any time that you guys would like for me to visit. And as I was talking to him, inshaAllah ta'ala, in the future, if there's ever a need, if time allows, time permits, I would love to come and meet all of you, inshaAllah ta'ala. But he's here now, and he's your imam. And I am the happiest among you, believe it or not, that he's here. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continue to bless him and his family. And I hope again and pray that you will all benefit from him tremendously. Jazakumullahu khairan.